Assalamu alaikum, and welcome once again to another episode of the New World Education Podcast. We thank you once again for viewing our podcast. We are back after taking a 2 week, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, hiatus, a 2 week hiatus. Not a 2 week hiatus. But anyway, we are glad to be back, and we are going to jump into the podcast real quick. But first, I would like to, of course, thank the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center for sponsoring this podcast. And of course, the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center says that they are educating at the speed of thought. So we just like to thank, of course, the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center for sponsoring this podcast. Also, before we get into introducing those who are on the set with us today, we would like to, of course, if you are new to our podcast, invite you to become a member of our community and share this content with someone who you think that might be able to appreciate it. In addition to that, if you would, please like and subscribe, yes, to our channel, because it helps of course, the algorithm. Please, by all means, while we're having this lively discussion today, join in on the live chat. It just makes the conversation more lively, and it just really brings it to another level. And so anyway, I want to thank, of course, our illustrious co-host on the set today. We have Sister Demoiselle Muhammad, who is our sound engineer and program manager. And also she is one of our co-hosts. And we also want to thank Sister Gabrielle Muhammad for gracing us with her time, being that it's so much at a premium these days because she's in law school. So we're thankful for any time that she has to give to us. So without any further delay, want to just go into what is our topic for today. Well, we've been going through the various schools of the Supreme Wisdom curriculum for the last couple of episodes, maybe about 4 or 5 episodes. We've been going through it. And so what we want to do is that we want to continue going through the schools until we finish all 9 schools. And the first one is, and then what we want to do after that, we'll have a discussion about the topic once we go into the school first. So instead of saving it to last, we'll start off with the school and then we'll go into the discussion. So how has you all's week been? Sister Gabrielle, it slipped my mind completely that on Wednesday you had your formative assessments. I totally forgot about it. So now live on the set in front of the whole world, how was your assessments?
Well, I'll say Wednesday on my formative assessment day is probably the best day I've had in school because it's the shortest. What? All we did was take our test, and that's it.
That's what made it good.
Just a quick 2 hours, and then I'm in and out. But as far as the assessments went, I believe I felt pretty confident in it. And actually, our professors, they specifically, well, let me not call people out, but we were well prepared, and we were over prepared, which is a good thing. So when we actually got the forms, we was like, oh, this is it, all that preparation. So that's kind of how I felt, and I'm gonna leave it at that. We'll see when the grades actually come back, but I felt pretty good about it. Felt pretty prepared, and thanks to my professors, we were prepared for that. And I feel like that was a sentiment from the rest of our class. But as far as the rest of my week, it's been good. I actually, right before the podcast, I was out in the front yard shooting my bow. So when I get time to do that, it makes me feel better. So it's been a good week because I've been back on my bow, with my bow, so I feel good.
Okay, so you can release some of that frustration by,
Yes.
and when she means
Yes.
both, she doesn't mean her boyfriend or her fiance. She means, it's not a BEAU, it's a BOW. So archery is her release. So Sister Demoiselle, how is your week this week? You're looking good. I don't know what you're doing, but you're looking real good.
I was
Yeah.
getting burnt up by the sun. No, I wasn't
Okay.
getting burnt up. I was getting
You know what?
I was getting kissed by the sun. However,
And you look like it. You look like a sun kiss. Uh-huh. Yeah.
yes. I mean, yeah. And what you say on my hiatus for 2 weeks working, one with the storm, and then Savior's Day week. So back at work and was outside all week.
Okay.
So
Well, you look good. That sun loves you.
yes, and I feel like we had a very, very long and interesting winter for the South, and particularly Louisiana. And the heat has come back. So
Yes, the heat is here, not the
yes,
winter. Huh?
that's
But you know what?
no.
They're supposed to be having another storm coming, a snowstorm coming through Texas. So it's always possible that winter has not left us yet. Okay. So just
I'm looking forward
you
to
down
that.
for that, huh? It's
Yeah,
hot.
because this southern heat is no joke, and so
It's
like
unforgiving.
people felt like the cold disrespected their heaters and their heating systems. Like this it's not even in the peak of the hot season, and it's already disrespecting every type of air conditioning we have going on. So yes.
Okay, well, hopefully, we'll find some balance. You'll get a little spring in there sometimes, where you can like open your windows and have a little breeze come through, and not open your window and feel like a heater that you're living inside, not a heater, a dryer. Yes. So anyway, so with that being said, it sounds like you all have had a good week.
Sister Deborah, how was your week? Before you try to move on, how was your week?
My week. It's it obviously it's good. Really can't even remember. It went by so quickly. You know what? Before we even go into anything, I think I'm still off of going through Savior's Day. I think that Savior's Day is still kind of on my brain, and so it seems like one, extended period of time. And so Savior's Day for me was awesome. And I tell everybody this, next to my first Savior's Day that I had in 1997, I would have to say that this was the best Savior's Day for many reasons. Not only did I get an opportunity to engage in most, if not all, of the workshops, which is unheard of, but for me, because I've always been for almost 20 years on a post. So I never really got an opportunity to get into the workshops like talking about it. For the last 5 years, I was conducting a workshop. So for me, this has been like heaven. And then not having to, deal with all the things that are associated with the post. So it's been great for me. Great. Get to hear the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, And then the thing about it is not only getting to hear it, getting to go back and listen at it again. Every year in the laborers meetings, we would hear them, and then many people would just be coming into Chicago or Detroit on Thursday, going straight to the laborers meeting, and you really are not perceiving everything. So I think that, if you want my vote as to how Savior's Days, should be, I give it a thumbs up. I'm down with virtual reality. And then I felt like I got to see everybody anyway. It was great. It was great. So maybe I'm just selling my.
Trying to find. You didn't get lost trying to find the workshops.
No, didn't get lost trying to find the workshops. It was awesome. I liked it. So anyway, for me, it was a good week. It was a good week, coming off even a better week. So praise be to Allah. So let's go ahead and get right off into our topic today. I don't want to belabor the point, and our We're on episode 23, believe it or not. And as history is best qualified to reward our research. So in the Supreme Wisdom curriculum, we have a school of not just history, but true and proper history. And then it's the history of great nations and people, because it's about the cycles of, let me say it correctly, it's the school of true and proper history of the cycles of world history and great nations and people. That's the name of the school. Because this history, like the former president talked about alternative facts. You remember when they asked him about where did he get his facts from? He said these were alternative facts. Well, we have an alternative history to the history that we learned about in school. It's so different that it blows your mind how different this history is, but yet and still you have to kind of be aware of what they're teaching, but most of it is based in and rooted in a revisionist history. You know, you would think that history began with the Caucasian man, the way that it is presented to us. You would think that history has a very short period, and that somehow the Homo sapien came from, a primate, which we may call monkeys, chimpanzees, primates. All of a sudden, human beings just popped out of nowhere. And of course, the primates, for some reason, they try to represent them as looking like they're African people, or people that you may see, like, for example, the Aborigines. They try to say that, that was a lower form, or that the original man was actually a lower form of human being, and that the Caucasian man is the apex of the Homo sapien. So that's how history is written. But as we have said many times on this podcast, is that their history, the European history, the Caucasian history, is so short in relationship to the original man's history, it is not even worth mentioning. So the question becomes, in this new educational paradigm, we have to begin to start teaching true history that is proper and requisite for the time. Because you could teach a revisionist history, and normally history is written according to the person who wins the conflict. So we have to begin to start teaching our children this true and proper history, because it is the thing that gives us the knowledge of self, the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the enemy to self, and a very, very important point, the knowledge of the time and what must be done. Because in history, we learn about timelines. So I'm going to start off here before we go into getting any comments, is with our Supreme Wisdom lessons. Lesson number 2, question and answer 1. So the question is, who made Holy Quran or Bible? How long ago? Will you tell us, why does Islam renew her history every 25,000 years? And the answer is, the Holy Quran or Bible is made by the original people, who is Allah, the supreme being or black man of Asia. The Quran will expire in the year 25,000. Parenthetically, it says 9,080 years from the date of this writing. The date of this writing, which was in, I think, September 1934. No, it was February 20th, 1934. So that's from the date of that writing. And I guess we could do a little challenge to calculate from that day of this writing, when will the Quran expire? Wouldn't that be a nice one? So the Nation of Islam is all wise and does everything right and exact. The planet Earth, which is the home of Islam. Okay? Now, you don't see that in your history books. It says the planet Earth is the home of Islam and it is approximately 25,000 miles in circumference. So the wise man of the East, black man, parenthetically stated, makes history or Quran. So we're changing history and Quran to equal his home circumference, a year to every mile. And thus, every time his history lasts for 25,000 years, he renews it for another 25,000 years. So, of course, the history that we're presented in the schools that many of us send our children to, we don't teach a 25,000 year history. Well, I mean, and that's no time in comparison to the timeline of history. So let's go ahead and begin our conversation in terms of true and proper history. What's your thoughts on this topic?
I mean, my thoughts on this topic is that when you're talking about history, you're really talking about everything. So when you're thinking about history, everything that has been here for a time, they have a story attached to it. And then the more you kind of put together all these different stories and different narratives, you can build a more full and complete history. And so the thing is that, even something as simple as a tree, has a history to it, and you can read the history of that tree. And so, but going back to this idea that really came about with the Bible, that history is only 6,000 years, and it's interesting that that's still taught as doctrine, that history only began 6,000 years ago, when science has come and proof has come that, human beings have had civilization well beyond that. And the fact that this is still taught as doctrine, and it's really the kernel of a large sector of the human population's belief, you really have a large section of the human population that's really being misled. Because if you have something that's as essential to a person as their belief, and has been found to be flawed and accurate and has not been changed since then, that's a serious disservice to the people that ascribe to that. And so in the Nation of Islam, we believe that there really is no separation between church and state, or a separation between science and religion. And so, if you have a religion that can't really square up with the science or make mathematical sense, you really have to reevaluate. And so even when you study the history of the Bible, it's, again, the messenger taught us, he really broke the seals on the book and told us who exactly was that speaking to. Because as you said, even in our lessons, it says that, it used Holy Quran or Bible. And so if we want to do a little English lesson, those two are interchangeable. And so if there's a history there that really can be studied, we have to study it with the correct lens. And there is a science behind that too.
That's right. That's right. And interesting, not to veer off too much, but interesting that you should bring up English lesson. And that's a whole nother story there, because the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan introduced us to a something called the English C1, and it is a system of language proficiency that the British use to determine how proficient you are in the English language. And so, interestingly enough, that is something that we had found a couple of years back, maybe about 2 or 3 years back, and just doing a simple Google search, and we found this English C1. So yes, and that's something to be looked at, and that be something that we'll talk about perhaps at a later time.
Yes, and it's so interesting how that kind of played out, because I remember the last podcast that we did before Savior's Day, because Savior's Day weekend, that's the reason that we've been on this hiatus, is because Savior's Day weekend, one, for that first week, we chose not to do the podcast. But the previous podcast, we discussed language, mathematical language arts. And so for the minister to kind of come back and really even, put a focus on that topic that we were talking about. And when he brought up the English lesson C1, the C1 English proficiency, and that's the exact same thing. I was like, I actually knew that before because Sister Deborah, we were having a conversation because I was doing some research, and then she was bringing to attention to the research that I was already doing on the Supreme Wisdom. She had brought my attention to that English lesson C1, or the C1 of English proficiency goes kind of back to the British Indian learning proficiency, because you had when the India was colonized by the British. And so again, when you colonize a territory, colonize a people, you also bring the language of the colonizers. So for a lot of Indian people, English was not their first language. And so they came up with this system of teaching English and a system of tracking your proficiency in the English language for the Indian people who were colonized in. And when I'm saying India, I'm talking about people from the actual country, India. And India is mentioned all through the Supreme Wisdom lesson. So because that's what the research that I was doing on the connection between India and the Supreme Wisdom lessons. And so she brought that to me years ago. So it's interesting that the minister has brought that out right after we had discussed that. So, I mean, goes to show this curriculum, as you were saying, this curriculum that you compiled, you bear witness that you compiled this curriculum based off of your study on Master Fard Muhammad, the Most Honorable Muhammad, Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And here, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan kind of comes and brings that out. So, yeah.
Praise be to Allah. All praises be to Allah. So, Sister Demoiselle, history. What are your thoughts about the whole concept of this history? Now, I'll just go ahead, because I was going to read the definition of, their definition of history, if that helps.
Well, personally, I wasn't going to make my own comment. I was going to, thus saith the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Can't go wrong
about history.
Yes, right? Ma'am.
So this is an article that Brother Jabril wrote on Farrakhan the Traveler.
Okay.
And he said that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that first, history is above all our studies, the most attractive and best qualified to reward our research, as it develops the springs. Hold on, let me see. As it develops the springs and motives of human action and displays the consequences of circumstances, which operates most powerfully on the destinies of human beings. Second, it stands true that we, the lost foundation of Islam in the wilderness of North America, have not applied ourselves to the study of history, but rather to the folly, having lots of the bread of idleness. And when an effort was made to the above effect of history study, it was to our detriment by not knowing what history that was more valuable to aid us in the knowledge of our own nation. The wise man is the one who have made a careful study of the past events in ancient and modern history. The knowledge of the future is judged by the knowledge of the past. There are men born with a gift of prophecy, while some are trained into the knowledge by intense study of the past events of history. And so that's my take on history, that this history that we really need to be learning is not only what, I won't say not only, but what we learn in quote unquote school, but those of us who have supreme wisdom, we definitely need to look more deeply into what we've been given by Master Fard Muhammad and taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because if he was studied all the civilized nations, then a lot of what we have that he actually compiled is not new. He just,
it's history.
Yes, exactly. And he just coded it to where it can slip so to speak, through the crack, or come like a thief in the night, I would say.
Yeah.
To be able to awaken, a sleeping man.
Right.
But it's not new. It's right there.
Yeah. That's powerful. That's really, really a powerful concept of how that the God could come and bring the knowledge that we needed, but bring it in such a way, just like the name Wallace means stranger, bring it in such a way that no one could detect it. And, just history. He brought it in himself. Mm-hmm. He's like, like they said, that movie, The Book of Eli. So mm-hmm. He brought all that history written in himself, those books of history, the 150,000 years of history that he can recite day by day.
Right.
Think on
because the thing is, if you're carrying something, people can see that. And like you used the Book of Eli, nobody would suspect a blind man to be able to, do the things that they shown him to be able to do in the movie.
That's right. That's right.
So, he was a thief in the night.
That's right.
So
that's it. And like I say, I want to get my little visual aid right here. This is one of my birthday or birth anniversary presents. And this is a very beautiful rose gold hard drive. It's 2 terabytes. And when I figured out or saw what a terabyte was, in terms of how much available space you have. This terabyte, it holds so much that is unbelievable. And just imagine. Now the question is, can a terabyte hold 150,000 years of history day by day? You say yes? You're shaking your head, yes?
Oh, no. Look, you know how always, soon as the conversation gets started, my encyclopedic mind starts going. So I'm bear witnessing to what I'm reading in this book about history. And so, yes, continue.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, of course, not the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, Master Farrakhan Muhammad, that if you want to kind of think about this in terms of the capacity of memory that he contains, and he's only growing in his ability to memorize, because he could go all the way back into the mind of the originator. But just think about he almost was like a computer, almost was like he was jacked into some type of computer database that holds all this information. Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad called it the ether. And just imagine, and without getting too deep into it, because we don't want to go too deep here, but just deep enough. But just imagine having, because this hard drive, if I disconnect the cord from the hard drive, it's just a little box. It's nothing. But once I connect this hard drive cord, and then I take the USB and I put it into my computer, the back of my computer, then I can begin to interface with what's here. And it's like Master Farrakhan Muhammad had some type of direct connection into this vault of history that exists, to be able to go all the way back. So in terms of there's certain part that he could just remember day by day, just like we studied the lessons, there are those of us who can memorize the entire supreme wisdom. But then just imagine if you could just look at it just like I'm looking at the hard drive or that external hard drive on my computer screen. Like you could jack into that knowledge, that wisdom, and literally just read the history right there. But it's all in your mind. Like you just read it. Okay, this is what happened. Let's say 1,075, years ago, 175,000 years ago on day, whatever they called the days of the week back then, or whatever, at this time. And these were the people that exist. That's some powerful stuff. So our history is so vast and it is so encompassing that literally, man, to be in a religion, if you want to call it a religion like this, is really a gift from the Lord of the worlds. Because that means that we can get outside of the control of our open enemy because we know something that he has no power or authority over, which is history. Yes.
He tried as long as he could. But,
And that's something that you brought up. You were saying that that's a power, and that's another thing that history is knowledge. And as the and as the oft repeated phrase goes, knowledge is power. And so what about history makes it powerful? What about the knowledge of history makes it powerful? And that goes back to the messenger's quote: is that it gives you insight into the springs and motives of human behavior. And as we're taught, history is cyclical. Yeah. And so the thing is, if you understood and really studied what happened before and why people made these decisions and how based off of those decisions, it changed courses of history, or it changed, in real time, it changed people's lives in real times, which is the result of where we are today. If you change something now or do something now, make a decision now, you will change the future into whatever course that you want to go into. And so we shouldn't look at history as a dead thing, but history is a living thing if understood correctly. And and that's the thing in school and in study. That's how history is taught, is as a dead thing. And that's why it's not one of the most interesting courses in school. People kind of think of history as like an elective, or like, kind of like a give me class. They really like to put any work in, just have to memorize and recite some facts, and that's all it is. And that's absolutely not what history is. Because just like thinking about it as your personal family genetic history, it can tell you a lot about yourself. And you can make better decisions based off of your history if you just, knew the truth of it. One way, you can be a descendant of somebody and, be in the line of succession of inheritance. That's why it's important to know your history, but also your medical family, genetic and medical history, which gives you, certain propensities, and then you can learn how to best care for yourself based off of that history. And so it's the same thing with the nations. Nations fall and rise. They might not have exactly the same thing, but the same overarching things is that you see the same cycles in nature. Just like, human beings, we grow, we start from childhood, we grow into adulthood, then we get old, and then we die. And that's the same thing with everything in life. And if you can recognize the patterns of history, you can actually take advantage of those patterns. And another thing what that is that really is the core of what mathematics is. The core of mathematics is recognizing the patterns.
That's right.
You add, two even numbers together, you're always going to get a what? Another even number. That's a pattern. Right. And when you add an even and an odd number together, you're always going to get a what? An odd number. And when you add two odd numbers together, you're always going to get a what? An even number. And so those are patterns. And with those patterns, we can manipulate those and the knowledge of those to really bring anything that's in our mind in the subjective realm to the physical reality, which is the objective realm, the objective realm. And so that's the same with history. It's recognizing the patterns and using those patterns to secure some benefit for yourself, not when you're dead, but when you are living.
That's right. That's right. And one thing I wanted to say about what you said about history being a living thing, being organic, is that if you think about it, knowing history gives you the ability to time travel. People want the physical bodies to travel back in time. That's not necessary. But your mind can travel when we know that from the lessons. And it can travel forward and it can travel backwards. Maybe the physical body can't time travel. Well, theoretically, they say that we cannot time travel to the past, but theoretically we could time travel to the future. But maybe that's because the enemy has a limited amount of time, so therefore he can't go beyond, as Sister Demoiselle quoted from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the limit of his knowledge, right? Oh. And he had supreme wisdom because the knowledge is power. That's what you said?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I said. That was in one of her raps about great bars. But nonetheless, the point is that this is the ability to time travel. And you can get on this track and travel backwards. Look in to what someone did, as Sister Gabrielle said. Then you can run forward, and then you can change something in the present to affect the future. And even in some respects, you can go to the future by certain knowledge, because that's what the scientists do according to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They study the minds of the people that are living during the time when history is about to renew itself, and they begin to start writing it in advance. Now, if we think by any stretch of the imagination that the enemy is not studying the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we are yet blind to what he has given us.
I mean, to cut you off,
that's okay.
Honestly, who do you think has been proven to teach us for us?
True that. Now, with that being said,
I just have to put it out there.
The minister said it. He said, we want to thank these scientists for going and proving and doing the research that verified the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said that on the time and what must be done. But the thing about it is that this is what we're on YouTube right now. This is social media. And so when we talk about the algorithms and hitting the like button helps the algorithms, what it does, it helps people to see what we're thinking. So if you hit the like button on this video, then they are starting to calculate, okay, well, this many people, like this content, and this content is going to be against our future, against our rise. That's what makes the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan so dangerous. He's the most dangerous man alive, because I can put a video of us talking about the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and talking about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and the content may be very interesting and stimulating, but if I put a video on here of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the likes, the views, all of that is going to be, triple, not even triple, is going to be exponentially more than what we as individuals or collectives can do in terms of the algorithm. So what does that signal to the enemy, who doesn't want us to get outside of their control?
It's easy to kill a million. That's what that signals.
Yeah,
because they can't control, exactly. They can't control a million anymore. So it's easy to go ahead and just kill a million.
But think about it. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave the instructions not to take the vaccine. They're saying that 60 million people have taken the vaccine up to this point. That sounds like a lot when you don't know how many million people that there are in America, right, which are almost 300 million. So 60 million, 300 million. They're less than 10% of the population that have taken the vaccines. In your great state, which used to be my great state, they are saying that they have surplus of vaccine because nobody wants to take them. Mm-hmm. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had ran ahead, he was able to thwart their plan of keeping us, blind to their machinations by running ahead of them all the way back to Sister Gabrielle's, one of her favorite lectures, which is July 20th, 2019, when the minister said, and that piqued my curiosity, he said, falsehood is losing. He said, they are about to do something. Nobody ever saw COVID. I didn't see COVID. I didn't see any of that.
They said, the wise ones saw it.
Yeah.
Because earlier today, it just so happened I was reading through the pamphlet, and let me see who said it. it was either, was it, what's the man name? Bill Gates?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to look at it because I just so happen to have it right here.
Okay.
But I'm gonna have to find out where it is. But he was saying that that in the future, and this was, I think, about in between 2012 and 2017.
Okay, I
that
remember.
a surprise
Pandemic.
virus is going to come about. A surprise virus.
But that's the having this requisite knowledge, having a certain orientation of mind. The minister is able to see all these events and put them together.
Exactly.
So divine revelation comes to him through having, all of this, having a base knowledge of thinking, having a certain history, studying his teacher, and being intimately, connected, as if, Sister Gabrielle, two bows that are, shot from one arrow. So they're just that close, so that he could see, putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, what they planned on doing. So anyway, with that being said, let's go ahead and I see Sister Gabrielle's looking up stuff, Sister Jamel's looking up stuff. So while you all are looking, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go into what I want us to deal with in the curriculum. So you all just go ahead and get your stuff ready, and we're going to start. I'm going to look here for, just let me know whether or not the screen is clear. Give me a thumbs up if it's clear. Okay, good. So this is the School of True and Proper History of the Cycles of World History and Great Nations and People. Now that is a mouthful. This title comes from part where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says that we must have, he says, true and proper history. We must have a true and proper history, because you can string facts together and still the outcome will be a lie. So we don't want, just facts. We want the truth. And then we want history that's proper or requisite for the time in which we live. If somebody tells you that they want you to meet them at the train station at 7:00 p.m. Central Standard Time, that's good. But you need to not only know, what time, you need some more facts in order that you can be there at the proper time. So you need to know what train station or what city, what train station. The train station may have lots of rooms in it. What rooms? So you need to know whether or not we said Central Standard Time. So we need a bunch of things that we have to put together so we can make the right actions according to the time, so that we can move in according to the time, so that we won't miss the train. So we need true and proper history. But we also have to understand, if you can recall in school, they had a timeline. A line is, by mathematical definitions, it has two terminal ends. It has a beginning and it has an end. But according to our teacher, time is cyclical. Our teachings, time is cyclical. So time doesn't have, or the history within the original man's history doesn't have a beginning or an ending. And he teaches us this in our lessons. What is the birth date of Islam, or the Nation of Islam? It has no beginning nor ending. So it lets us know it's cyclical. And this quote that's in the beginning of this school is the same quote that Sister James L. read from Brother Minister Jabril's article, Farrakhan the Traveler. And just for reference's sake, that this was written on April the 2nd, 1936. So this was early in his development. He was just a 5-year-old baby at this time. And he wrote this to some of his ministers at that time. And just for, so it can burn into our minds, I just want to read it again. It says history of all of our studies is most attractive. Now we have to think about that. Most attractive. It has a drawing power and best qualified to reward our research. Now just think about it. In 1936, how did that look? How did history and studying and research look in 1936? So he said it is best qualified to reward our research as it develops the springs and motives of human actions. So if you study history, you can study the minds of the people and displays the consequences of the circumstances which operate most powerfully on the destiny of human beings. Now, the destiny is referring to the future of human beings. So history, it says, operates most powerfully on the destiny of human beings. It stands true that we, the Lost Foundation of Islam in the wilderness of North America, have not applied history, have not applied ourselves to the study of history, but rather folly. Rather folly. So as Sister Gabrielle was saying, that we think that history classes are fluff. They're just something that they tell us to take, but it really doesn't, can't make any money with it. We can't use it to build anything, quote unquote. So we don't really take it seriously. And it says, so we did, because we did not know that history was most valuable to aid us in the knowledge of our own. He continued, the wise man is he who has made a careful study of past events, of ancient and modern history. The knowledge of the future is judged by the knowledge of the past. There are some men who are born with the gift of prophecy, and others are trained into it through an intense study of history. So this is very important. We can actually have prophetic powers if we study history. Once again, going back to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, being able to see that something was coming down the pipe. Now, when we learn history, and parenthetically devils, we know the devil, he says. He continues. He says, we study the men of yesterday, their leaders and teachers. So we need to study it. As long as we are with the enemy, we need to study his history, not for the fact of being, becoming patriotic or becoming, enamored with his civilization, but so we can understand what's in his mind. We studied the men of yesterday, their leaders and teachers. We must study yesterday in order to be able to move on, he says. To know yesterday is to know today, and we will have some knowledge of what we are expected to know. Therefore, history is very important. If we do not know the history of other people, we cannot communicate with them. Okay, that last statement was from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, July 5th, 1968. All right. Any thoughts on that before? Yes, ma'am.
It was so much, and that's why I love reading the writings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because he speaks so concise, so precisely, so mathematically, and he means what he means. He doesn't mean what he doesn't mean.
Exactly.
Right.
And so,
beautiful. Beautifully put.
But a lot of times, in this world today, we assume people's intellect by their ability to spew out many words,
articulate,
and different words and lengthy words. But we really don't pay attention to what it is that they're saying. And so if somebody, explains a very weighty subject in very few words, we might think that they don't know. But I just love the way he speaks. But I just want to break down, like, really word for word every bit of that quote. I mean, man, like that, I could have just fell out of my seat. But he says history of all studies. So
Mhm.
let's get that. So history is the one that he brings out, and he said of anything that you can study, it is history that is most attractive and best qualified to reward our research. Pause.
It's a
That's
lot.
that's a statement, as in our different types of sentences. We have statements, we have questions, we have these different, going back, I believe, like,
Interrogatory.
yeah,
So
and
you
it
have
was,
different
it
type
was
of statements.
it was commands.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have declaratory, which are like, so you have
Commands.
commands, you have declaratory, then you have interrogatory. So that's just
Interactive.
pause right there. That part of that, if we put a period where that comma is, that's just a statement, right? But then when you add the comment, he qualifies the statement.
That's right.
But so let's just, so history of all studies is
Comma. Comma.
is most attractive. Most. That is the highest superlative. So that means it's at the top and nothing above it. Is the most attractive and best. Another, the highest level of the superlative, qualified to reward our research. So when you're researching and you're trying to study something, can we get a definition of research?
Okay, and let me give you a definition of history too, because I had pulled that up. History, according to Webster, it says that history, according to Merriam-Webster, says is the chronological record of significant events such as those affecting a nation or institution, often including an explanation of their causes. So a chronological record of significant events such as those affecting a nation or institution, often included in an explanation of their causes. Next, history, a treatise presenting systematically related natural phenomenon as of geography, animals, or plants, and like the history of North American birds, an account of a patient's medical background, an established record. 3, a branch of knowledge that records and explains past events, such as medieval, events that form the subject matter of history, events of the past, one that is finished or done, such as history has shown that such efforts rarely succeed. And lastly, previous treatment, handling, or experiences as of a metal, a history. So for a history of repeated exposure to freezing temperatures. History. So the next one that we were looking at was research, right?
Right.
Research. Research is 1, a careful or diligent search. 2, studious inquiry or examination. And 3, the collecting of information about a particular subject. And so they have it in other forms. The transitive verb is to search or investigate exhaustively, and to, which is circular, which is to do research for.
Right.
So history.
And I have another definition of history. It says the systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. So a systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. And so if you're trying to do research or you're doing research, which is a systematic investigation into and a study of materials and sources, so you're looking at different materials and sources. So some of those materials and sources that we might look into are books, are databases, are things. So these are examples
archives.
Right. These are sources and materials. The sources, and it says in order to establish facts. Now that's interesting that when you're researching, you're trying to establish a fact.
Mhm.
If a fact is a fact, or if a fact is an actual fact,
Mhm.
why do you have to research it to establish it?
Mhm.
If it is indeed a fact.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you're trying to establish a fact, and then you're trying to reach new conclusions, but not necessarily old conclusions. You're not trying to land on the same thing or come to the same end that someone else already came to. The
Right.
reason you would research it, going back just a basic
Mhm.
prefix, your again into search is to look for. So
Mhm.
if you're
Mhm.
looking for again, if
Mhm.
you're researching, you are not doing it for the purpose of finding what's already been found. You're looking
Right.
for something new.
That
And
would
so,
be nice if history were taught that way, but we're looking for just to regurgitate dates, names, and things to that nature, which it makes it dead.
right. And
So
so,
history doesn't reward us. It doesn't, it doesn't, it's not attractive, and it doesn't reward our research because it's just
right.
something in the past, the way that it's
That's
taught.
right. That's right. And if you're doing just that, you're researching something, like you said, that's why history is something that is living. That's why you can look at the same set of facts, the same scenario, and get something new. Because when you look at it again, something else pops out. But
Mhm.
going further, so that's the statement, or what he declared was it. Now he qualifies it, says, as it develops the springs and motives of human actions. Pause. It
Mhm.
develops the springs and motives of human actions. So when we
That's
look at
deep.
history, we're not looking at history as in this term of history, a chronological record of significant events, such
Right.
as those affecting nations
Right.
and
Right.
institutions,
Mhm.
often including an explanation of their cause. So
Mhm.
again, if you're looking at history,
That's right.
it doesn't include explanations.
Mm.
And that's another thing about the definition. It says a chronological record of significant events.
Mhm.
So
That's
when you're
right.
looking at history, you're not just looking at any old Tuesday. You're looking at significant events.
That's right.
But how did those significant events come about? They
And
came
see,
about through
mhm.
human actions.
And that's why the title of this school is named for that
That's right.
reason. And that's not because I just came up with this about great world histories and great nations and people. Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and we'll have the quote later on, he told us that's how we study history. You look for great nations and great people, significant events,
That's right.
and you study. Mm-hmm.
That's right. But it says it develops the springs and motives for human action and displays the
Mm-hmm.
consequences.
Yeah.
So now you're starting at a cause, which is the human actions. And now you're looking at the display of the consequences, which
Mm-hmm.
are the effect.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
even though the human action itself is the cause, what he explains goes further, because it says the springs and motives that
Mm-hmm.
even brought about the actions themselves, which
That's
are
right.
just as important, they are just as, if not more important than the thing itself. So let's pause
Mm-hmm.
right there on that definition. Now let me finish it out. It says, and displays the consequences of circumstances which operate most powerfully on the destinies of human beings.
That's right.
So
That's right.
again, this is talking about it says the consequences of circumstances which operate most powerfully. Not just any side effect or any effect, but the ones that most affect. So now let's take that just statement and apply that to the emancipation of the slaves, the black slaves in America.
Well, before you
When
say that, can you just hold a pause, because I want to bring something that helps support what you just said. And this is in the lessons, and it asks the question, why does the devil keep teaching the 85% that a mystery God brings all of this, talking about rain, snow, hail, and earthquakes? It says to conceal the true God, which is the Son of Man, and to make slaves out of the 85% by keeping them worshiping something they cannot see, invisible. He lives and makes himself rich from their labor. And then later on it goes and it says about the 85% do not know the law of cause and effect. It says that it goes on to say that all history of Islam never reveals anything that no man had ever been able to come back from the physical death. Well, this is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the 85% don't know the law of cause and effect. And so that's part of what is the issue with history. Because if you don't know history, you really can't see the patterns of the law of cause and effect. If somebody does this, then this is going to happen. So slavery, this peculiar institution of slavery, because we did not know the history of the devil, we walked right into it. I mean, it was allowed, the law allowed it, but still, we still don't know history, the history of even of slavery, of this peculiar institution of slavery. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry about breaking in, but
no, because what you hit on was what I brought up in the message of Black Man.
Okay.
But I want to finish this out and then go back to that. But going to like I said, so now let's take a historical event, and now let's kind of look at it in the way that this statement implores us to. So you have the history of the emancipation of the Black slaves here in America.
Mm-hmm.
That was a circumstance, but when we're looking at it, we're trying to look at it into the springs and the motives. So how it's taught in school is that the reason that the slaves were free is because Abraham Lincoln was just a good white man.
He was an emancipator, they say.
Right. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to right the wrongs of his other white brethren and free the slaves because it was just a good thing to do. And so because of that, post the emancipation of the slaves, you had a lot of Black people when they became free and had the right to vote, they were voting Republican. They were on the Republican side, right? Mm-hmm. The Republican Party is the party that freed the slaves. So they were on the Republican. So in the Reconstruction era, you had a lot of the Republicans were what Black people today, if the people who think they're woke, they'll say that they were the Black people's party, like the Democratic Party is. And so how today, if you vote, with this cancel culture and this groupthink mentality, if you vote Republican, you're automatically a racist. But the Republican Party historically the one that freed the slaves. So, but because at that time, that's the way that the story and the narrative was being spun. That's why you had a lot of the Black people was siding with the Republican Party. But the thing is that now let's actually look into the springs and motives behind that act. And so as time, more sources came out, we had more access to sources and materials. We found out that what was going on is that Abraham Lincoln was the president he wanted to be the president of the United States. But the thing is that the country was split over the South, who wanted to keep their slaves, and the North, who didn't. But the thing is that in the North, you had, the industrial revolution that was going on. So they actually figured out a way to make more money without having to work slaves for free because they had technology. And so the slave culture and the slave business was actually just getting outdated. It was no longer necessary to use human beings to do the labor when you could have a machine and do it faster and at less cost. You don't have to feed a machine. You don't have to clothe the machine. You don't have to house the machine. You don't have to pay for medical expenses. You might just have to have a technician to maybe oil it, repair it, and then it can actually do more work. And so now he wants to keep the states united, and this issue of slavery is tearing it apart. So he ends up freeing the slaves, because when the slaves got free, they can turn into more votes and more manpower on the side of the North. And so I'm look up the history. I'm glossing over, but you see how the springs and learning the springs and motives really changes the tint to that narrative. And so if Black people knew that they were not, nobody really cared about them, but they were still just being used for their manpower,
A tool
in
and
a
also a
different way.
slave.
Right, you still being used as a tool and a slave, just for a different cause. And so that's the thing, is that when you really study history, you need to be learning the whys did they do it, not just the what did they do, but you need to learn the whys that they did it. And like as the messenger says, when you know the history of why people do things, you can better communicate with them. And so if I realized that the reason that you let me free wasn't because you wanted to be my friend, I wouldn't try to be your friend. I would just keep it strictly business. But if you, and so when you know the motives of people, you can better interact with them. Even though they might still want to use you, you can use them in turn. So it won't just be you being used as a tool and a slave, but you will actually be coming as another equal party to this interaction or transaction, and not just being taken advantage of. And so on your point earlier, when you were talking about you were reading over the supreme wisdom in Lost Bound lesson number Muslim lesson number 2, question and answer number 13, and what brings hail, snow, and earthquakes. And I'm going to skip down to the pertinent part. It says the 10% know what when men dies that he will never come back and tell the living whether he lied or not, because the dead is never known to return from the grave. It says all of the history of Islam never, all of the what of Islam?
History.
All of the history of Islam never reveals anything that no man had ever been able to come back from a physical death. But there is a chance but there is a chance for mental death, because the lost found once dead mentally, and now many of them revived from it. But they were not physically dead, only mentally dead. Now, to go further in the message to the Black man, in the program and position section of the Message of Black Man, I'm starting on page 162, where it goes into what the Muslims want and believe. Number 5 of what the Muslims, where am I? No, not number 5.
But while you're reading
Oh,
that,
yeah, number 5, I got it. Number 5 of what the Muslims believe. We believe in the resurrection of the dead, not in physical resurrection, but mental resurrection. We believe that the so-called Negroes are most in need of mental resurrection. Therefore, they will be resurrected first. Now, I'm going to skip to in the next section was the explanation of what the Muslims want and believe. On page 168, it says, there is no such thing as dying and coming up out of the earth, meeting your friends and meeting those who died before you. I say, get out of such slavery teachings. It keeps you blind, deaf, and dumb to reality. Let me say that again. It keeps you blind, deaf, and dumb to reality. Get out of it, for if you depend on such, you will not believe in yourself. That's what it says. You will not believe in yourself. When you are dead, you are dead. I have proof of that. Do you have proof of that which you say they will come back? Question mark. Do you have proof? Excuse me. No, I say that you, my friend, the mentally dead are awakening. Your slave masters have deceived you. They want you to remain deceived. And so going back to history, the history sets your possibilities, because if it happened in the past, it can happen again. That's so right. History not only gives you, into the springs and motives, but it also tells you what's possible and the likelihood of something that was never possible since the creation of earth, since the dawning of human beings wasn't possible. is it possible in the future? And it also goes in the positive light. If people did it back then, they still can do it now. And so this is why they cut off history to the point where they never show our history and teach us of our history of the things that we were doing that were greater than them. It's because they know if they have never taught the possibility of it, you will never try it.
That's right. That's right. Well, right. Facts. That's all I got to say about that. But I want to add, because if you would have kept reading from the one you had, who is the 85%? On 14, it says, answer, the uncivilized people, poison animal eaters, slaves from mental death and power. The slaves from mental death and power. People who do not know the living God or their origin in this world. They worship that which they do. They worship that they know not what. Who are easily led in the wrong direction, but hard to lead in the right direction. And so with that being said, that history, the study of history, is most attractive and best qualified to reward our research. So if we study it, we can escape the enemy because he can't go beyond the limit of his knowledge. But he's going after proving these teachings at no limit of time, going after writing history in advance. When we're talking about something is trending in social media, so it is a wave. So he knows if something is trending, he can jump in front of the wave and begin to direct it in the manner in which he wants it to go. So he's studying these teachings. He's showing us at no limit of time that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and what he taught us and how he taught us was actual facts. We have a brother Devon Johnson who has joined us, and we thank you for joining us today. He made a comment. He said, the scientists of this world have been studying the teachings since day one. Also, Satan knows who we are before we became cognizant of who we are. Assalamu alaikum. And yes, he's exactly right. And so that's in one of our lessons too. It talks about that the Muslim sons, they know. So let's go ahead and move a little bit further. Sister Tamasel, you have anything that you want to add to what Sister Gabrielle said not now? Okay. Well, moving forward now, Master Fard Muhammad, remember from one of the lectures or the believers meetings that we had with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan during Savior's Day, he made the comment that Master Fard Muhammad's father brought knowledge to him. He gave him information, but and I'm not saying it exactly correct, but the sentiment is that he did not make him into God. He gave him what he needed. And because how can somebody make you into God? Like the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad told of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I gave you exactly what I gave everybody else. Only Allah can show you how to put it together like that. So Master Fard Muhammad's father gave him information. Same thing with us. What are we going to do with this history? What are we going to do with this knowledge when we get it? How are we going to apply it so that we can show forth our God power? So we have everything that we need, but only Allah can show us how to put it together, in a way that gives us force and power. So anyway, these are some of the ways that Master Fard Muhammad was taught. It says the Mahdi, referring to Master Fard Muhammad at the time, is a world traveler. He told me that he had traveled the world over and that he had visited the Isles of the Pacific, Japan, China, Canada, Alaska, the North Pole, India, Pakistan, and all of the Near East and Africa. Those are the places he studied. And if you look at it and really break it down, you're talking about the Isles of the Pacific. You're talking about major groups of people, major civilizations. He studied the wildlife in the jungles of Africa. He learned the languages of the birds. He could speak 16 languages. And I'm not saying that he couldn't read the patterns of how birds travel and look at through study how they communicated, but also the language of the bird in the highest sense of the form means the language of the prophets. Okay, he could speak 16 languages and could write 10 of them. He visited every inhabited place on the earth and had pictured and extracted the language of the people on Mars. Now, we didn't have to send a rover to Mars like they have just sent another rover to Mars. He didn't have to do it. The mind can travel. Once again, it could travel forward and it could travel back. And it says that, and he had the knowledge of all life in the universe. What kind of knowledge is that, you all? The universe is vast, and he had knowledge of all life in the universe. He could recite by heart the histories of the world as far back as 150,000 years and knew the beginning and the end of all things. That quote is from the history of Jesus' birth and death and what it means to you and me by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, July 20th, once again, 1957.
The minister's lecture was on July 21st.
21st, okay. July 20th is my son's birthday anniversary, that's what it is. So, yes, so let me see if I can move this out the way right quick. And so the course description. Now this is lofty, you all, but if one man did it, that means that the potential for all of us to do it is also there. True and proper history of the cycles of world histories and great nations and people is a method of study of history, past, present, and future that transcends time as it is understood in this world. And that was written in 2007. It is constructed in such a manner that the student is able to utilize the records of knowledge and information related to natural phenomena based on observation and investigation, analysis of past events and present occurrences, and arrive at a precise position in time in the future. True and proper history is a true and accurate account of past events, both during the 6,000-year vacuum of time ruled by Yacub and his maid devils, and back 66 trillion years ago to the making of the sun. True and proper history is based on and in God knowledge, which is different. And it's the following is an introductory letter to the study guide number 4, The Struggle for Balance by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, about the importance of studying history of great men and women in the scripture. In the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. Assalamu alaikum. Dear fellow students, may this little reminder find you well and enjoying your course of study and practice. All of the prophets, worthies of Allah, God, are given to us in the Bible, and especially the Holy Quran as examples. We study the biographies of great men and women, for in their lives there are circumstances, successes, and trials that stimulate the motives and intentions and the desires of us along certain lines. We study the lives of the prophets, for we are engaged in an endeavor to raise Black people up in America and throughout the world from a state of spiritual and mental death. Their lives and prophets, the lives of the prophets, their trials, tribulations, successes and failures, their opponents, and their complete reliance on Allah God is a prerequisite to motivate us and give us confidence in the essential success of our mission. Their lives, the lives of the prophets, will cause us to see the ups and downs, ebbs and flows of our lives when we are committed to a very consequential mission. This knowledge will not permit us to give up because of the temporary setback. Like the prophets, we will press on, knowing that the bitterness we taste in every setback is temporary and will be removed by the sweetness of the taste of the ultimate victory over all opponents to the rise of Black people. The truth that Allah God reveals to us for our resurrection and the resurrection of the righteous will be established. Study the lives of the prophets, for their histories are given to us as signs of the one who would be raised up from among us, the lost found members of the Nation of Islam in the West, in the fulfillment of time. The mixed feelings and controversy that surround the prophets surrounded the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Their complete trust in Allah in the face of overwhelming opposition, the tenderness of heart they felt for their people are but signs to us of the demonstrated commitment of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said of himself, I am a fulfiller. He is not a carbon copy of any other prophet or messenger. He comes in the quintessence of the collective experience. That's deep. Study the life of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad carefully, for his is the path that we have chosen to follow. May Allah continue to bless you with a deeper and deeper insight into these lessons and a stronger, ever-determined will to succeed. And that is, of course, by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Student outcomes, just quickly. The intended outcome of this curriculum is to have the student well knowledgeable in the histories of the original man as far back as 76 trillion years ago, all the way into the future events that are yet to unfold. The premise of this pupil progression plan, or PPP, is intended to introduce the student to his or her own history first, then other histories and cultures secondarily. The purpose is to give the student a root in themselves before an indoctrination of foreign socialization can take place. So we have much more in here, and I would invite you all to come read some of the words that we have taken from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and going into the histories. But the first history in this school is the history, this is a hyperlink to a lecture called the Tribe of Shabazz Lecture and the Nation of Islam History. So if you want to go look at this, you can link to it. These are some pictures in terms of archives, and that was in Life magazine. And this is the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and as they called it then, the Black Muslims. So we in the Nation of Islam need to know our history, because we need to start with our history first before we go and study others' histories. So the Department of Nation of Islam Studies is the first department in the School of True and Proper History. So we start beginning 78 trillion years ago. And then we have a progression of histories as taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, going back 76 trillion years, and you'll see that there are very big epochs of time between major events that we're taught about, because you're talking about trillions of years of history. So we don't have all the parts filled in, but if we start studying what we are given, we'll see, of course, patterns, which we should be looking for, which there are clear patterns between the creation of the first God and the creation of the human being in the womb of his mother. So we have 78 from the beginning, whatever that means, to 78 trillion years ago. And then we have all of this interesting information here. And then the next epoch of time, we'll just say here, that it took 6 periods of time, or 6 trillion years, to build up in the dark womb of space/time. And here's a quote from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan from his Twitter. It was a question. Does dark matter and dark energy of the contemporary physics bear witness to the triple darkness? This is hashtag Ask Farrakhan. The answer, energy is always found in matter. So dark energy would probably be a part of dark matter. The black hole in space is very real darkness. There is matter in that darkness, and out of that matter, there is a power also in that darkness, and energy in that, and an outcome of, and out of this comes new realities. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan speaking on the whole darkness of space, dark matter. Then we have from 78 trillion years ago to 76 trillion years ago. So that's a 2 trillion year period that we're dealing with. And we have history here where in this first act of creation was creating the wombed man or woman. So we have history here. And then we have a large epoch of time. Well, no, this is a 10 trillion year epoch, which is from 76 trillion years to 66 trillion years ago. So we have a history here that we can pull off of and draw off of. Then moving down, we have 66 trillion years ago to 50,000 years ago, which we have the tribe of Shabazz shows up on the scene. So we have not a lot of information about this, but we need to start studying, because we can study from archaeological records 50,000 years ago. So we need to begin to start studying. As Minister Ava said, they're not archaeologists, they're grave robbers. So that's the way that she would say it. So 50,000 years ago, which is a major cycle, to 6,000 years ago. So we have all of that history within that era of time. And within that era of time, we have the tribe of Shabazz. We have the birth record of Buddhism, which also can be interchanged with Hinduism, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We have the complete fall of the original man. We have the exile of the Red Indians of Asia. We have, in this period of time, there are 2 cycles of 25,000 years. So we have the writing of the history in year 1, where the scientists predict the birth of Yacub. We have the history of Mr. Yacub. We have all of this coming up to the, of course, from 6,000 years ago to 1877, from the birth to the birth of Master Fard Muhammad, February 26, 1877. So we have that history, and some of this history, you know, we could go back through archaeological records and find this. as we talked about the OC2, I think it's the OC2 gene that they found 10,000 years ago that it mutated, and that's where it gives rise to blue eyes and along with that gene. So we can study this archaeologically. And then we have 6,000 years, okay, 1877. So most definitely we have written records of history going back to 1877. So we can start studying this. And so in this, we have the secret relationship between Blacks and Jews. You can begin to start studying. Then we have 1877 to 1914. Okay, so studying that period, what happened during that period, 1914 to 1930, study that period. Then from 1930 to 1975, that's another period of time that we study. And then we have 75 to 78, another period. And here is an article that was in the Chicago Daily Tribune. And this is Mas Mariam before it was Mas Mariam, the $1 Million Greek church group planned. And this was on the south side. And this mosque, or this church became later Mas Mariam, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when they were building that, took the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan through a ride-by and said that he wanted to, that was going to be the mosque one day. But look at the date of the article. It was written. Was that the date of the article? No, it wasn't the date of the article, but this is May 11th, 1947. That's not the date of the article. So anyway, very interesting, and study this. 1979 to 1995 is another period of time, and then 1995 to the present. And I would venture to say that once the minister departs, that will be the new era of time. Okay, I've said a lot. Okay, go ahead. I will open it up for comments.
No, I was just looking at how you had the cycles of time broken down, and I noticed that, you started off in the beginning, there were these large, really, incomprehensible spans of time, and then every time that major events start happening, they started to get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter in the period of time. And so even when we're thinking about the cyclical nature of the time, you have larger cycles and you have, smaller cycles within. But the thing is that going back to really using that information, it's almost like at every level or every major period of time, it's like a different lesson to be learned from that expanse of time. And so even going, in the beginning with the originator, really all of his problems were on his own. Those were, it was the personal struggle or the internal struggle first, and then once he made the woman, and then now you have this next period of time, which is now kind of a global issue. There was somebody who was dealing with dissatisfaction amongst many people. And so, and then you had that great period of time, and then you also had going to Yacub, you had another. So it really, on each of these, it's almost the same issue, which is dissatisfaction, but it's on like a different level or a different aspect of it. And it's all about,
from universal all the way to personal.
Yeah. Or vice versa.
All depends. So if you look at
it all depends
the originator as a personal,
right?
He was the universe,
right? But there was dissatisfaction, and then there was also separation.
Always.
So a dissatisfaction, a separation, and then a change.
Always.
And so just thinking about just time itself And when before there were nations to have a history of, there still was something to be learned from those histories before there were nations.
Right.
And so yes, but history is itself, or time is a great tool. It's not just a dead thing, but it's a dynamic thing, and it's a tool that we need to learn how to use. Because like I always say, when I get to a point where I feel like I've kind of reached my limit on what I can take and what I can do, I always reflect on the originator and the impossibility that he had to overcome. And so there was no one to help him. There was nobody around to complain to there. So he had to go within himself and bring out of himself the solutions to his problems. And he couldn't depend on anybody else. Not saying that we are totally like that, because we were not brought into a world where we were just totally independent. But at the same time, as a God, a little g, even though my name starts with the big G, but as a God with the little g, I also reflect when I come to adversity and trial. I always try to go within self and pull on, self and the inner strength, and then have that kind of come out. And so, yeah. So there's just history. History is replete with lessons.
Exactly. Well, all of the histories that we're taught should be put into some type of book that we can refer to. I mean, because, well, it is put in the book. You have the books in front of you, The Message to the Black Man, but we have to teach it in a systematic way to ourselves and to, of course, our children. So the next department is the Department of Science, of the science of world histories. Once again, going back to what you were saying, Sister Gabrielle, about where you look for patterns, that's in mathematics, right? So the Department of the Science of World Histories, patterns or of rise and falls of nations. So we're looking at it from a mathematical standpoint. The courses will be the root of civilization in Arabia and Egypt, because the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that the root of civilization also was in Egypt. So Arabia was what we call now also modern day Egypt. African civilizations, Japanese civilizations, Chinese civilizations, ancient Far Eastern civilizations, and then we know that the Indians were exiled. So we want to talk about the exiled Indians, because those are the ones that are here in the hells of North America, and then the European civilization. So these are those root civilizations that we want to study. Department of Geography. So we're not just studying geography that we know it now, because the Earth is a dynamic planet. As a matter of fact, where I'm living, I got a placard on my door. They're in the process of doing geological studies here in this area. And they told us that we may feel some tremors. Literally, they are, yes, setting off some kind of a sound waves in the area here to study, I guess, the seismic, how this area would respond to seismic activity. So a seismic research. So just looking at the whole concept that the Earth is a very dynamic planet. And so I say that to say that the Earth is not now, is not how it was then. And so we have to start going backwards to study the Earth as it was when Allah created it.
But can I say something? That's
sure.
Again, I think something that we gloss over is that geologically, the Earth is not the same that it was even 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, because of course on the surface of the Earth you have climate change. Just as you were talking about, ancient Egypt was an oasis. It was very lush. Mm-hmm. That's why on the hieroglyphs they have pictures of animals that mm-hmm. you would see in a jungle. And so right. It's, so there are pictures of animals that live in deep forests, such as lions and tigers and things. So you wouldn't, these animals wouldn't live in a desert. You'll find snakes and scorpions and things, and just they had alligators on those, cheetah, and all these different hippopotamus, hippopotami. I don't know how to make that.
Hippopotamuses.
Yeah, right. But the thing is climate change. Same thing with you had what they call the ice age, and what is now known as the Bering Strait at one point was frozen over. And then you also have continental drift, because at one point the earth, so the only way you can really study the history of the earth itself, even geologically, is you have to study the people that lived on it, because those are the ones that left things that you can actually trace back, and that can give you some clue. You have to study the flora and the fauna, or the wildlife and the plants, to see the similarities between the two. And so when you study the actual creatures that live on Earth, and you study the evolution of those creatures that live on Earth, then you can kind of get a better picture of even the geography of the Earth. So even going down to this civilization that everybody's looking for, this Atlantean civilization, you are not going to find a landmass of Atlantis, but you might be able to find certain artifacts of that place. So you have to study the actual the civilizations that lived on the earth to even learn about the history and how old the earth is.
Exactly. So, Student Minister Ava is doing a lecture series called The Deportation of the Moon. And she's putting that book out. I think it may already be out, I'm not sure. But with that being said, that, if you blast out a large portion of this planet, it's going to change, because the earth, if you will, think of it like an egg, and the eggshell being one contiguous covering for what's inside the actual egg. The outside is a shell, and that shell is, like I said, contiguous. Think about if you would crack the egg and take one part out, it's going to, of course, change, if you will, the surface or the topography of the egg. And that's the way that the planet Earth was before the deportation of the moon. So we had the continent, what we call continents, it was all one landmass. And so and the earth at that time was called moon. And so we study, or we try to, the best we can with the knowledge that we know, study what the earth had to be like before the deportation of the moon. Climate was different at that time, because according to the teachings, that the earth was not tilted at that 23-degree tilt to the plane of the axis. It was almost perfectly at a 90-degree angle. So that means that you're not going to have the seasons like we have now, because the earth would not have dipped in and out of the orbit of the sun as such. It would have been a more consistent climate during that time. So if you have a growing season all year, if you don't have like extreme weathers, extreme cold and extreme hot, you're probably going to have a lot more vegetation, because you're growing more. So these are the things that we have to think about as we're studying this, what we'll call alternative history to the history that we're taught in school. After the deportation of the moon, then you have what they call plate tectonics. They give it they're just saying that the earth is dynamic underneath, and that's why it's moving. But when you take the continents and move them back together, you'll see clearly there's a piece of land missing within those continents if you try to reconfigure it and put it back together like a puzzle. So then you have to, think about their theories of it. They don't even give an explanation for why there are continents. So with that being said, We studied the earth, which was called Asia after the deportation. And then, of course, now we study the earth as it is now. Because as a matter of fact, from the San Andreas Fault in California to the coast, the Pacific coast, that landmass is moving, according to geologists, away from the mainland at 1 inch per year. So if you would just continue, and that's not with earthquakes. So if you would continue in that trajectory, you will see clearly, if you just go 100 years from now, where California would be if there was no human intervention, which I don't know which there can be. But anywho, we also have the ability at looking at all these moving parts to extrapolate and look at the earth of the future. How long would it take for the continents to move back to one landmass? How would that look? When landmass come in contact with one another, they cause disturbances on the surface of the earth. Like we have it's not induction, but it's subduction, when one plate goes under the other and it causes earthquakes. So we have this ability, and we should teach our children not just to look at the past, but they also should look at the present and also the future. We must speak the language in the proper terms. So we also talk about topography, geology, the study of rocks, the flag of Islam as a survey course. And this is one that my brother Donald in Baltimore came up with, called it theography. And it's the study of the location of the self-creation of God, because we're told that the earth is the home of God. So it was developed in this pocket of space. So that's some heavy stuff. So anyway, the Department of Social and Economic Systems Studies. So of course, we have it all right there for us. The Fall of America, a survey course. Torchlight for America, a survey course. The Millions More Movement, National Agenda, survey course. Muhammad Mosque Provisional Constitution, a survey course. These are all courses of study that we should master, because they're right there with us. We need to study theocracy, democracy, fascism, monarchy. We looking at what's going on over there in Britain with Meghan Markle and Harry, Prince Harry. Oligarchies, representative republics, capitalism, free market, communism, socialism, all of that stuff is relevant. New World, the future New World economics or economies, how does that look? Is it going to be Bitcoin? Is it going to be, all of these new monies that are coming out? And that's more information there. And then we have the study of the minds of people. And this, I'm going to read this. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that thought never dies. Thought never dies. He did not say this of the physical body when it stops breathing. And when once interred in the earth, ceases the life beat we once knew in that particular body. Where does thought go? And in what form does it remain that it will never die? Our whole body is made up of layers and layers of thought that we can only describe as interdimensional thought waves or vibrations that hold the tissues, the cells, blood, or organs intelligently together by the power of the brain. With the vital life force or energy that is required to sustain us, we become integrated into our ecological environment, enabling us to move into action. When the process of deterioration sets in, our thoughts are continuously active and creative, sending out electrical impulses and vibrations that are forming other material realities and parallel universes prior to the expiration of our physical existence. Depending on how strong the thought is, it has the power to materialize our thinking while we yet live or after we die. Now, this is, I'm sure this is Mother Tynetta, yes. And I'm not going to go into the rest of it, but you have to read it if you get it. And so the courses of study. So we have the mind of the creator. If Master Fard Muhammad studied into it, we can too. We have the mind of the scientist, Shabazz, 66 trillion years ago. What were his thoughts? Okay, and it didn't just happen, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, it wasn't just one person. It represented, a group of people and their mindset. The mind of the scientist Shabazz. What was his mindset? The mind of the scientist Yacub. The mind of Alfonso Allah, Master Fard Muhammad's father. The mind of Babaji, as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad called her, Baby G, Master Fard Muhammad's. What were their minds? The mind of Master Fard Muhammad, the mind of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the mind of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, which he gives us a book called Closing the Gap. So that helps us some. So in here, you will see that we have different courses. We have strand 1, which is geography and theography. Strand 2 is civics. Strand 3 is economics, and strand 4 is history. So on level 1, this is what we would teach our children. The topic is our Nation of Islam. What is the nation? So that's level 1. Level 2, our Nation of Islam, building a nation. This is what we teach our children. Level 3, our Nation of Islam, the world we live in. Level 4, geography. Level 5, world histories. Ancient 76 trillion years ago to 50,000 trillion years ago. Strand 6, world histories, 50,000 years ago to 6,000 years ago. Strand 7, world history, 6,000 years ago to 1914. Strand 8, 1914 to the present history. Strand 9, world economies, civics, free enterprise, and economics. Strand 10, political systems, state and government. Strand 11, future histories, psychology, the study of the psychology of the minds of the people to write history in advance. And believe it or not, this was done before social media. This curriculum was written before there was a Twitter, there was a Facebook, and people were studying this, through social media. So this is, that's it, So any closing comments? We shared with our viewing audience this very voluminous school of history. There's lots for us to study, and as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, is most attractive and best qualified to reward our research. It is fascinating, and once we get into it, my goodness, you just get really just enthused by the study once you get into it. So closing thoughts. I see we have some comments. Sister Pamela K. Muhammad, praise be to Allah. Shout out to Sister Pamela. It's always good to see you. I pray Allah that you are having a wonderful day. This is Shah Lajaj. I'm sorry if I'm messing up your name, but praise be to Allah. Yes, thank you for joining us, and walaikum salam to you. Okay, so we said a lot. People can go back and look at it, but closing comments. And Sister Demoiselle, we most definitely want to get your closing comments, because you always come and drop the mic. You drop the mic moment. We'll start off with Sister Gabrielle, and then you drop the mic for us, okay?
Oh, wow. I thought you was going to let it go first. Well, I guess that was a lot, like you said, but I guess the only thing I would say is that let us look at history as a living tool and not just something that's in the past and dead and is good to know, but it's something that we can use for us. And so that is the highest level of studying history, is to be able to make something of it.
Yes, indeed.
I think that was very simple and straight to the point. Drop the mic moment.
Okay, so history.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yes, ma'am. So we thank you all once again for joining us. We thank you for your comments. They're always welcome. Sister Pamela, join us next week at 5:00 or 5-ish Central Standard Time. We would love to have you. I'll say at 5-ish because sometimes we don't quite make the deadline, but we're here in this 5:00 hour Central Standard Time on our Saturdays. Yes, ma'am. Sister Deborah. Yes. Okay. No. Nothing to say. But as always, it's been an joyful conversation. And really, to be honest with you, these conversations are kind of letting you all in on personal conversations that we have as a family about the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And Sister Demoiselle, believe it or not, she is usually quiet, and is usually the quiet person that always is learning something because they're just taking the information in. And so Sister Gabrielle, she has earned her name of Gabby. So she tends to have a lot of information to bring to the table, and of course I try to get in where I can get in with this conversation. So these are conversations. It's hard.
No. I'm saying this is usually how the conversation goes at home.
Usually.
I think it's actually pretty good because normally you two are
back like and forth.
Yeah. And I jump in every now and then. So this is
part
what you see
course.
Is how we normally are.
Yes.
I'm quiet, but I say what I have to say when I.
Yes, this is true. And also the fact that we go on for hours.
This is true.
That is true as well. So about as long as this podcast is about as long as probably one of our phone conversations is. And then we just always have to leave out, try to leave, say, oh, I have something to do, let me get off the phone,
Yes, pretty much. So we thank you for joining us in our conversation about the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad that just so happened to center around education, which is, as Sister Gabrielle said, in our family, they have been taught that there are two things that can fix everything. And one is education, and two is garlic. So that is what we talk about. Education most of the time, and the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So thank you for joining us. And like I said, if you like this content, please, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, yes. And then if you, like what we had to say, leave us a comment. Sister Pamela thank you, Sister Pamela. She is making up for all the comments that weren't left. Praise be to Allah. We thank you. We love you. And of course, tune in next week. Share this podcast with somebody who you might think can benefit from it. And take a look at our website, the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, because you can find the curriculum over there. And, of course, we would love to have you come join us and, of course, add to what we have already brought to the table. With that being said, may Allah bless you all till we see you again next time as we greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum.